Trinity Church. I always welcome you guys with like open arms, right? It's like Trinity. It's just such a beautiful, beautiful church, right? You can't miss it. I mean, you can't pass by Broadway and not notice Trinity Church. It just like screams for you. She like calls for you, and she's here waiting with open arms. Now, Trinity Church is probably one of the most important churches in New York City history, and not just one of the most important churches, but one of the most influential landowners in New York City. I bet you didn't know that, and they probably don't want you to know that. But they are pretty powerful church. They own a bunch of land, and they're really, really influential. Primarily, influence started because of their location. I mean, look at where we are. Right on the corner, smack in the middle, Broadway and Wall Street, at the center of all the action in the late 1600s. British controlled New York City. Now, why did this church come to be? There's a reason to everything, and there's a reason why they built this church. I want to take you back to British controlled New York. The British took over from the Dutch 1664, right? So here we are. A few decades go by, and they still don't feel like they really got a grip on this colony. America's already starting to give Britain a headache, and it's still a pretty volatile place. It's like I said, it's when dealing with the monarchy, it's always up and down, and this is a time of a little bit of turmoil. And they don't feel 100% secure that we really got control. Now, let's be honest here. One way to unite a kingdom, religion. Let's create a church. So the governor of New York at the time, Fletcher, he proposes this plan to create an extension of the Church of England right here in New York City. This would be a great way to have a little bit more power over the colony. So in 1696, this building comes to life. Now, as is the case with a lot of these things, like I just said, there's a fire, so that building got destroyed, and then they built another building, and that building started to fall down in the 1700s. The roof started to cave in, and it gave them problems. They tore that building down, and then finally, in the 1840s, 1846, they finally built this church. At the time, it was the tallest point in New York City, way to establish control, right? Look at that, that's pretty smart. I mean, the tallest point is usually a church, and that was the case here in New York City, the tallest point. You would come in and the spire reaches 281 feet in the air. And today we see the Statue of Liberty and the Empire State Building. Pretty soon it's going to be the new World Trade Center as the symbols of New York. Brooklyn Bridge, can't leave her out, right? But at the time, Trinity Church, for many, many years, was the symbol of New York. If you were arriving on a ship, that would be the number one thing you'd see, and you'd be like, I'm in New York City. It'd be on the postcards. Trinity Church remained the tallest point in New York City for many, many years. Yes, and I want to tell you a little bit about the land ownership part, because that to me is pretty interesting. 1705, Queen Anne of England grants 215 acres of land to the church. Right now, this portion of land is west of Broadway. If we had a helicopter, you'd be able to see it on a map. It's the portion west of Broadway between Fulton Street and Christopher Street. It's a pretty big section of land, right? And they started to rent it out, you know. And one of the renters was King's College, which eventually became Columbia. They even gave one of their first classes in the church. So you can thank Trinity for helping out Columbia University. It's pretty interesting. And yeah, so they had all this land, and they still are one of the greatest, most influential landowners in the city. Even though today they only own 8% of those 215 acres originally, but don't feel bad for them. I mean, seriously, they own a really big portion of the world's most valuable property, Manhattan, you know. So they're one of the world's richest churches. It's a pretty interesting thing I was going to say. Oh yes, 1979, Queen Elizabeth came, and oh, I forgot just to tell you this. When they had the church, when they first opened up Trinity, the agreement was that New Yorkers were going to pay 1 peppercorn a year to the crown. 1 peppercorn a year. I mean, they really needed that, you know. It's like essential rent money. That 1 peppercorn, we should still use peppercorns as like currency. That'd be cool. But they had 1 peppercorn a year as rent. Now, you know, Americans are pretty rebellious, so they ended up forgetting to pay that rent for quite a while. So when Queen Elizabeth finally visited the church in the 70s, 1979, they even have a plaque where she stood. So fancy. This guy came up to her. I love this. This guy comes up to her with 273 peppercorns in back rent that they owed. And can you imagine like the Queen of England carrying back to England all these peppercorns? I wonder what she did with them, but they actually did it. And allegedly she sneezed right after she got to it. She's so classy. Gotta love that queen. Yes, well that's Trinity for you. This is, yeah.